Today I'm going to be making a vegan pork belly and a vegan bacon following a recipe by Future Lettuce that you can find on TikTok and Instagram. The first call out to this recipe is that you need to have a starch water. The starch water is basically the water that you get from mixing the flour out of like a dough. If you recall a previous video that I made by Future Lettuce making a vegan chicken, you can see the video on my channel. That there's a washing method in order to remove the flour from the gluten. Well, basically we're keeping that leftover water, and that is the starch water. That is a base to this entire recipe. This recipe is super simple to make in terms of using ingredients. We're just bringing in the ingredients separately, one for the meatiness and then one for the fat. We're using that starch water and we're adding a little bit different ingredients to each, mixing it up, and then those elements are done. This next part is a little bit trickier in the sense that I don't have a microwave, and so I had to find the right temperature and length of time to cook it in my air fryer, in my Breville air fryer oven. And so what I found to work is actually setting it for 275 degrees for 10 minutes for each layer of the meat, then fat, then meat, then fat throughout the process. You're adding a layer of meat, putting it in the microwave for about 3 to 5 minutes, or again using like what I have, and you're taking that out and you're putting the next layer over it, in which you're just going to alternate between meat and fat until you are out of the mixture. When this is all finished, you're gonna need to cool it down, because otherwise it's gonna be too hot to work with. So go ahead and cool it down for a bit. Once you get it out of the container, I brush some coconut oil to add some a little bit of a sweetness to it, but also just to kind of add to that fattiness that bacon pork belly has. And then just wrap it up and add it back to the freezer for about 30 minutes, and then that should be easy enough to work with. When that is done, really it's coming down to the cutting, right? I mean, a simple way to talk about meat is that there's lots of different meats that come from different parts of the animal, but then it's also based upon the cut, right? And so we're taking this slab of vegan meat and we're going to cut it into thinner slices for bacon, and then a little bit thicker slices for the pork belly. So I find that when it comes to cooking both the bacon and the pork belly, I add it to a dry skillet first and get it cooked up on each side, because I don't want to mess with the integrity of the pieces and have them falling apart with the fat separating from the meat. So I do the dry heat first, then I add some oil and kind of move the pieces around in the oil to get that kind of that fattiness, that liquid fattiness that comes about when you cook off bacon. And then just let it cook off for a few minutes to get that crispiness, and you have your final product. Overall, this process, again, it's simple. It's kind of time consuming. The complexity doesn't really come from making the ingredients. The complexity really comes from balancing out the layers, specifically, you know, the first meat layer, right? Is it cooked enough, but not overcooked? Adding in the fat layer, the same exact thing, right? And going throughout the entire process there. Overall, the texture is pretty good. I like the texture. I like the flavor overall. I think that there is a little bit of room in order to bring out a little bit more, you know, bacon and pork flavor. So I'll be looking into that. But the bacon itself worked. The pork belly, it worked. And it's pretty good overall. I'll give a quick note that when it came to that water base that I was talking about, I just took 3 cups of flour and added 1 1/4 cups of water and made a dough ball and let it sit for an hour. And then I just filled up a bowl with water and put that dough in there. And I just went through the washing method through that in order to just come out with this, you know, separated gluten and then kept all of that water aside to use for this recipe. You know, I definitely recommend this method, this recipe that Future Lettuce has come up with as an alternative. I don't know yet if it's you know, my choice of recipe yet, but I could see myself using it again, doing it again, but just playing around with the flavors a little bit. So that is the pork belly and the bacon, and my next video is going to actually be a different version, or pretty much the same method, but it's going to be a little bit different flavor through the recipe, as I'm going to be using a recipe by Sauce Stash.